Good evening and welcome to LegalTech Live episode 97. Our guest tonight is Joshua Maley. He is the founder and CEO of Theorem LTS, and he's going to tell us all about Theorem LTS in a moment. For simplification purposes, it is a legal tech platform. Allows also in a marketplace, I'm thinking, Josh, the way I'm viewing it, but I'm going to have you describe this to us in much greater detail with your intro. Josh is not a practicing lawyer. He is a legal tech founder. He falls in with our co-host and myself as in going to law school, but we're not practicing law anymore. My co-host for tonight, of course, Pieter Gunst of Legalio, a friend of the show, and who's one of his co-founders has been a co-host of the show many times or several times before. So thank you, Peter, for joining us. Thank you, Joshua, for being here. Joshua, a little background on yourself and a little background on how you came to Theorem LTS and where you and what the company is about.
Love it. Well, thank you for the intro, and I appreciate you having me on. The first thing before I jump into that is I just want to, throw out some thanks. I mean, I don't get to publicly thank people enough, right? Maybe we all fall into that. And the first one is my, big thanks to my team who's probably working right now and grinding away at the code. And, the next one to our board members and advisors. The next one to, our investors and everyone who's kind of, supported us in the beginning and, taking my calls at 11 o'clock at night. I'm East Coast time, so it's a little after 9 here. And then of course to my family, who's just incredibly supportive at all times. I've got a stunning and loving wife and a beautiful little girl. She's going to be turning 3. We just talked about that, and she's upstairs going to bed now, which is good. And hopefully, she may join us. We'll see what happens. I'm never quite in control. So
right.
That's my thanks to the team and all.
And we should probably take a moment to thank Maya Markovich as well. From Maya Markovich, I think made the introduction to us from Denton's and Next Law Ventures. So I will thank Maya for the intro.
Love it. Maya's awesome, and I met Maya through the Lex Lab. So some thanks and shout out to the Lex Lab, which is at UC Hastings. And Drew and all those guys. So, all right, I'm happy to jump into it.
Yeah. Tell us about a little bit about your background and what the company does.
Sure. So my background, I went to law school, but before that I worked for, 5.5 years in finance. And, I had this great opportunity to a client of mine who also owned the soccer team that I played for. I played Division I soccer at LIU in Brooklyn when I was an undergrad. And the owner of that team down in Laredo, Texas, unbelievable family, the Vaswani family. He took me under his wing in opening up this private, small private office angel fund to invest in all sorts of startups. And that was sort of the start of my entrepreneurial journey and getting to know what the founder lifestyle was like and being able to invest in all sorts of different things. And we also became pretty acutely aware of the inefficiencies of the law in working with lawyers and structuring our deals. And that was kind of where I was as, in my position with the fund, going out there, looking and sourcing deals and then structuring them in the right way. So I got to interface with the attorneys, and, when the first fund was deployed, the capital was deployed, I had this really great opportunity to go to the Wake Forest Law School. I sat for the LSAT. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And I ended up going to Wake Forest, getting through law school. And I mean, thank God I got through law school, did the 3 years. And I think LegalTech kind of brought me through that. I struggled with a lot of different things. And I'm happy to talk about the law school experience or anything that surrounds legal education. But, I get out of law school and I meet all these different people, and I realize how much I don't know about the law, right? And the structure and how it functions. And I actually happened to be, weird short story. I met Scott Mazarski, who was at, Bloomberg Law for a while, coaching his kid while I was studying for the bar, right? So then I get invited to this unbelievable legal tech mafia breakfast run by Ari Kaplan in New York City. And there's all these KMs and CIOs there and COOs. And I really got to listen to all these career operators and start to understand how all this stuff is happening. And I sort of followed some of the announcements of funding in Kira in law school. So it's like, wow, this is a really developing ecosystem. That said, I didn't see anyone who was playing in the platform space looking to connect a lot of these things. And that's really where Theorem, I think, is positioning itself. Our goal is to solve, perhaps one of the most glaring problems for technology organizations, whether they're in law firms or throughout the legal industry, and that's the adoption issue, the adoption of legal tech. Lawyers have no way to understand all of the options and services available to them at the point of pain and within their workflow, and engage with technology. This is the engagement issue. This is the holy grail, right? And they just firms have no way to increase the utilization and push these solutions within the workflow. And it's very difficult. And of course, legal tech has become as fragmented as the legal industry is broadly. So that is what we're solving. And that's Theorem LTS in a nutshell.
All right, cool. And so how do you solve it? You have law firm users as well as vendor users who join the platform. Are they both paying users? How does that work? Is it or marketplace kind of idea or something more?
Well, I think the marketplace, I'll get into that.
Okay.
The way I really look at Theorem as an underlying platform is more as an operating system, right?
Okay.
And if you take all the hardware away from your Mac, I'm on a Mac, right? But if you took all that away and you looked at the screen, you would say, look, this is a program displayed to me that's giving me a bunch of utilities, right? That's sort of out of the box. And what is the first thing you do when you get your Mac? You start downloading all the great things that are in their app store, and being able to see and identify, assess, see all that stuff in one spot, and then being able to interact with it, engage with it, and then connect these things and achieve high levels of automation, right? So our big thesis is we want to deliver the applications at the point of need within the workflow. And we do that through that type of portal and that type of, hopefully that's analogous enough.
Yeah, it is. Peter, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, Joshua, thank you for running us through that. So it's interesting to see the evolution of indeed these platforms, right? Like if we were looking 10 years ago, it might be hard to identify a legal tech solution. 5 years ago, there was way more of that. Now we're seeing them categorized, right? And as you know, there's been a number of lists, right? Bob Ambrogi, Stanford publishes one. I'm involved in that one, but that's a spreadsheet, right, of technology. So what do you think is the core innovation that you can kind of deliver for your customers on top of that data, right? Yeah. That helps them get their job done.
Sure, I think you're exactly right. And I think that there's also an issue even with tech surveys that are offered. There's sort of these single stamp point in time kind of things. And then they're, maybe a month from now or 2 months from now with the changing ecosystem, they're sort of irrelevant, right? What we do is give you all of the information that you need to identify and assess legal tech solutions on a task basis, as well as on a matter basis, as well as see the number of firms of certain types that may be, in our ecosystem that are using that thing. And we're also displaying the pricing information as much as we can up front. There's been a lot of different things that are happening on the enterprise level, and I'm happy to talk about that. But it's also to understand the integrations and displaying this all very openly to see what are the integrations of every legal technology so that you can understand the matrix. And when you're searching by a particular core suite of applications that you need a solution to connect to, you can find that.
Now, as a follow-up question to that, then, having myself dabbled in the wonderful world of marketplaces for quite a while, because essentially this is, in the end, what you're doing. Marketplaces will often deal with this initial challenge, right? You're either more supply constrained or demand constrained. How's that working out for you?
Well, I got to say, the vendors have the same problem ultimately that the firms have, right? They need to have built-in client success, and they need to be able to deliver that solution at that point so that they can have the retention that they want at the same time as the utilization issue of the firm. So there is actually, thinking about it that way, much more of a bridge on both sides in the marketplace. But I will say for sure that vendors are much easier to get onto the platform. And that's because we're also offering a lot of different things like connections to the core business tools that firms and also in-house counsel and in-house groups and other business, the clients use, right? The HubSpots, the Salesforce, all the major applications. So that's on the vendor side. And the firm side, there's no secret, no silver bullet on the firm side. It really depends. But we are focusing much more on the AmLaw, say above the AmLaw 20, AmLaw 50 and beyond, who I think are, getting more curious as to how they can increase the subscription utilization and reduce redundancy. I mean, ultimately it's about, workflow efficiency, but also about reducing cost. If you speak to any CIO, CTO, and you ask them about their core tech stack, most of the time, they know their core suite. It's hard for them to have 200, applications in their head, right? And we give them the ability to collect this and display this on a practice group level and share that internally. And that's where we're seeing sort of the community-driven stuff that the marketplace can, plug into.
No, Nick.
One second, Peter. So that does raise a question. Who is in the firm side? On the firm side, who is your primary user? Are we talking CIO and the staff from in the information office, or who's the primary user on the law firm side?
From the portal perspective, in terms of viewing and gathering your legal tech, right? It's going to be whatever the core team is. So some firms it's the KM team. Some firms it's more on the CTO or IT side. That's just the admin though. Just because you have an admin portal doesn't mean that you don't have lots of other users who finally have a spot where they can say, hey, what does our firm subscribe to for this particular type of thing that I'm working on?
Gotcha.
Right. And be able to look at that. As well as the ability to deliver that same experience at the very point that a task or a email is sent to a shared email or a task, a number of triggers that can basically affect the delivery of that solution, right? So I plug it in context. Now, some firms want to just see the stuff they're subscribed to. Other firms are saying, okay, as long as it meets our, sort of standards and our security stuff and, the underlying infrastructure and integrates with these things, will allow them, will allow our groups to procure their solutions. So it really is on a firm by firm basis.
Firm by firm. And who is the end user normally at the law firm level? Is it paralegal, lawyer to paralegal to other support staff? Is it a pretty wide variety, or is it lawyer specific?
It's pretty wide variety depending on the size of the firm.
Okay.
I think our sweet spot is that smaller firm, right? Probably in the AmLaw 200, and then the 10 to 20 person firms, the decentralized firms, these sort of new models as well.
Fair. Go ahead, Peter. I didn't mean to interfere.
No, I was getting ahead of myself here. But maybe as a continuation on that, we've talked about law firms for the past couple of minutes. Obviously, legal departments are a huge user and driver of technology. Can you speak a bit to the differences you've seen between those two audiences as you, talk to them about your product?
Well, I think that there's a great survey that just came out from Wolters Kluwer. Ken Crutchfield actually did this study and promoted this study on LinkedIn if anybody's interested. He said that 81% of in-house firms want to actually understand the tech usage and the tech stack, right? The specific types of things in the commitment to the technology side. So I'm not going to say the word innovation because all of a sudden lawyers start jumping down all over our throats. But the tech side, they want to see that. So we give them the ability to actually visualize how their firm is using technology to solve some of the problems they have. And there's a lot of different use cases for what you can do with the product. So I don't want to talk about all of them, but.
Sure. Joshua, from the founder perspective, what has been your biggest obstacle so far in is it just any obstacle? How about that?
Well, I think Peter kind of nailed it on the head, really. It is the market. Building a dual-sided marketplace is one of the most difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're tackling it from not a minimum viable product kind of piece, like, although of course we had that. We're looking for minimum viable happiness. So that is sort of the big thing that we want to do. And there's this great hierarchy of marketplaces that was released by, I think it was a study of the top 100 marketplaces, everything from Airbnb. And we're trying to just take some of that stuff and seeing what we can apply to legal. So the biggest challenge is of course going to be getting both sides of the marketplace to really interact. And we have some ideas around that, which maybe I should ask and see what the audience thinks or whatever the case is, that we think will help promote some of that transparency. But as soon as you start to think about transparency, you have issues surrounding, look, lawyers can find issues in pretty much anything.
Sure.
It's their job, right? But for instance, let me just share, right?
Please.
Let's say I were to take the top 600 firms and display their technology stacks on our platform. Now, StackShare does this, right? This is a StackShare initiative kind of thing. There's a whole company that does this, StackShare.io. They've got the actual code base. It's a developer community, right? It's made for developers. You wouldn't want to go work for Slack or for Microsoft or any of the big, technology companies without knowing what it is, the platforms that you're going to be developing on. And also for the interview, that's probably pretty important. You need to be able to say, look, I understand this tech stack and these things. They look at tech stack on a code level, on an applications level, on business tools level. We look at it more strictly from an application standpoint, all the different legal tech and not the underlying kind of infrastructure stuff. But there's millions of companies on there, probably zero law firms. So that is something that we would love to do. And the question is, could lawyers see significant flaws or significant problems with transparency? And can they weigh that properly against the knowledge that there's always going to be risks in evolution, and that the dissymmetry of information as to what their competitors are using and the dissymmetry of the marketplace as it is now is that this information isn't flowing very well, and it's very hard. Like, the only stuff you can get is very anonymized, and it doesn't really help you that much.
Interesting. So this is more of the silos in law that we keep hearing about, which is interesting because a couple of weeks ago, a guest was Michael Reinhardt from Fox Rothschild. He's the chief information officer for them. And he described to us at his level, the interaction between he and other CIOs in big law seems to be very helpful. But at some point which myself and my co-host at the time, Nicole Clark, thought was kind of mind-blowing. We didn't expect that. And it sounds like what you're seeing is there is, again, this silo on what is the tech stack that a law firm's using. So that is siloed. So I wonder if there's room for growth there within that CIO community at big law firms, that you could convince them in the value of sharing this information, because it sounds like they're relatively open with each other, at least, as to technology that's being used and trusted vendors and so forth. Anyway, that was just a thought. I was spitballing, waiting to see if anybody in the audience had questions tonight. But Peter, you look like you're just brewing another question there.
I have millions of questions. One that is interesting, you know, the founder's game. If you're building a platform, a lot of this is speed to market and such. You know, one company that I looked at for a while is Renyon Court, right? Which at least at face value to me seems to have like a similar value proposition. I'm wondering whether you feel that is a correct assessment or you see like key differentiators there.
Sure. I think the first thing is that we're pretty small, and I would say that I'm not as focused on what other people are doing. So forgive me if I'm, you know, we're pretty heads down. We've got a small team working on a pretty big problem. But I would say that I've seen a couple different things, right? There's the security side of that and some sort of kind of bucket solutions like that on the security front, or it's very hard to tell, especially when you add a lot of the marketing that happens in the industry, specifically what things are doing. But I do think that there's probably overlap when you just look at it from a marketplace kind of standpoint. Now that said, our focus is to be a very neutral player in this. And the idea is that we are not going to say gather firms or gather vendors, right, and try to position ourselves with one or the other. And I think that is absolutely key to nailing this marketplace, right, ecosystem, you know, the parity that you need to accomplish the actual engagement on both sides of the aisle.
So you need to treat them equally is what you're saying.
Right, exactly. And I think if you look at it from like a dev rel kind of side, like dev relations, right, you don't want to be on one side or the other either. And you need to be able to say, and this is what is one of the most difficult things when vendors come to us and they're like, well, why would we connect into your underlying system? You connect into ours. But they're going to start to realize that is what is sort of exacerbating a lot of this fragmentation of this industry and a lot of the problems that result because, you know, it becomes about, hey, let's connect over here, and we forget about all of the connections over there. And the client really suffers, specifically the law firms as well, because they're not able to adapt quickly to all the best-in-class tools that will continue to come out. I mean, before this talk, we were joking about the Neuralink, right? And you want to be able to take it. I mean, I'm not putting an implant in me; it's not happening. But right, I want to be able to at least consider the new and the best, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to just deliver the best. We want to get back to the basics. Think about great product, good design, solid marketing, and just great distribution. And I think great distribution comes from, especially as a marketplace platform type of company, it is to be neutral and as neutral as possible. And it's very, very difficult. Don't get me wrong.
No.
But it is something that we like. It's our values, and that's part of our distribution strategy, is to maintain those values.
Do you guys do any of, on the being neutral, do you do any of the checking of the security third party sort of checking on your vendors who join the platform? Do you do any of that?
We partnered with Prevalent Inc., a fantastic company, great team. And of course, we're neutral on the security front as well, in terms of vendors that provide third-party risk assessment and security assessment, GDPR, SOC compliance, all that stuff. But again, we don't want to be in the business of any of our vendors. So even from a security standpoint, we've actually partnered with Prevalent, who has just over 50% of the ML 100. They're a fantastic partner. And that was, I think, key to our efficiency, and also to help with the standardized, the standards that you want to kind of prevail across the industry as well.
Yeah, because there are standards that are, so if somebody already has that figured out, I think that's a good way to do it. Peter, what's up?
Now, Joshua, legal tech. What is it? Where do we draw the line, right? It becomes so. I was watching this beautiful documentary about sticks being used as a legal tool for counting, like thousands of years ago, right? It's legal tech, right? So if you run this marketplace, because of the, legal touches so many things, are you starting to develop a sense of like, this fits into our ecosystem? This is outside of it. Is anything outside of it eventually?
Interesting.
It's a very good question.
So much technology is not, legal tech, right? And that is part of our sort of the core systems obligation that I think we have, and we want to understand what that matrix looks like, right? So, there are a ton of vendors that are on our marketplace that are not what I would consider legal tech, right? They are the core CRM systems, the core collaboration tools, that kind of stuff, right? I mean, I could probably go on and, on and on about that. Legal tech to me, coming out of law school, was anything that sort of was its user interface was the analysis of a senior level attorney. And that is my distinction. I mean, I don't know the answer to this question. I don't think anybody does, but
no, I don't think you're going to come up with a perfect answer.
So to me, it was wow. And this was a realization that I had in law school when they didn't teach me how to practice, right? And I was coming out with virtually nothing and, whatever. I said, wow, there's a bunch of really interesting legal tech applications, very siloed, very point solutions. They do like one for trademark search, one for trademark registration, another for forms, another for brief writing, another one's going to do the contract analysis, but the other one's going to do the drafting, right? So any of those analysis tools match with sort of the process tools, and that's what we focus on a lot is the process, so we don't have to get into the business of the vendors. That can be combined well, and that's what we do as well, is aggregate them. That to me is that's legal tech. Anything that matches that analysis and makes that easier. So we can focus on process, plug the applications that help with that process and that task, as well as the applications that do a lot of the routine drudge analysis as well. But as far as the no code stuff, I try not to get into the analysis. We believe in Jarvis, not Ultron. I want to just kind of give that, right? I mean, let's enable the attorney to make the decision. That's what,
right.
That's ultimately.
Is there, within that, do you guys do any form of rating within your own system? Is there any, this vendor has 4 stars out of 5. Do you have that kind of experience in the system, so that these firms have rated this vendor well, and vice versa? How does that work?
Yeah, there is a rating system. Right now, we have, if you were to look at a vendor's profile page, the rating system has a 5-star system, and it says TBA, because it's something that I never really wanted to get too into. I felt like there was communication and direct communication that firms would have, the leadership would have amongst themselves, kind of like you discussed earlier. But we are gathering the reviews, and we're going to see, one, if they meet kind of the standards that we'd like, as well as, can we enable the user to quickly filter by the reviews that matter to them? So if I'm a CIO, I want to see CIO reviews. If I'm a CTO, I may, or some combination of that, right?
Right.
I only want to see reviews from firms that are my peers, or whatever the case is. So the system is incredibly flexible.
No, I think we lost you there. Joshua, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. You're back.
Yeah, the system is really flexible. So whatever.
That's good. Yeah, the review system is always a nightmare. I work in a marketplace as well in the day job, and we have specifically avoided the review or rating system over the years, just because we weren't certain how it would play out. We didn't want it to turn out like Yelp or something like that. We wanted it to be better than that. Peter.
One of the things that has always fascinated me about looking at data around legal technology is that over time you see the trends. How many chatbot companies are being created? Why is document management suddenly so hot compared to 2 years ago?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're seeing? And in particular, are there some that you find exciting and having a lot of potential in terms of impact of the technology?
I don't like it when my co-host asks the good questions, Peter. You may not be able to come back, Peter. These are good questions, but that is fair.
So self-serving question. I'm really interested in kind of
Sure.
what you're seeing, Joshua.
This is one of the interesting, neutrality kind of things, right? No, but
yeah, no names.
No names. Yeah, just like categories. If you see any cool categories.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. There's hundreds of like LPMs, there's hundreds of graphing tools. It's insane, and I think we've just kind of like touched the top, but and there's so many. But I would say that no code is the sort of the future revolution. The revolution of software development is, I think, going to affect the law in a very interesting way, and I think that there's a lot of no code kind of workflow visualization platforms that come nowhere near to the quality of Theorem, so I'll plug myself there. But
fair enough. That's what you're here for.
I will say that the no code kind of thing is definitely really being embedded as a feature into a lot of things.
Yeah.
Do I think that that's necessary? No. I think that vendors should just I think that no code kind of engine could be neutral itself, right? And it could be much more of an application display rather than sort of, I don't know if you all are familiar with no code, right?
Enough, yeah.
Yeah, when you're creating these, they can get incredibly complicated.
Drag and drop, essentially.
Yeah, but they're just, especially if they're focused on analysis, I think attorneys have a problem with that. So I would say that is a burgeoning field that really needs to be done correctly, and that is another area that we have added onto our operations system and our operating system to kind of affect a lot of this change as well. And we want to give that to vendors and firms.
And no code's really impacting a wide swath. It's not just legal tech. I mean, it's impacting the development world and in a fintech and health tech. I'm seeing a lot of maybe more fintech but no code seems to be being pushed in a wide variety of sectors. Joshua, what has been we got about 10 minutes left tonight. What has been one of your best success stories? And again, you don't have to share any names, but what's been one of your best success stories from a founder perspective?
I'm gonna actually look internally for this one.
Okay.
And it was when my co-founder. My co-founders are unbelievable developers, right? And law firms will tell you a lot of times that developers, they're never going to attract the best developers, right? The legal tech companies are always going to pick the best developers, right? So things in law firms. Some say this, others might agree with that. But there's a point at which these developers become very good legal tech developers. And that's when they start to understand the business of law, they understand the jargon, and they get really good. And they get to take my knowledge of, the legal practice and legal operations that I get from my great board members and asking a lot of questions and finding believable people to disagree with me on stuff. But it was the point when one of my co-founders, he's like, hey, you've designed this, but I understand how the user's going to use this. And for the first time, instead of just being like the just gangster programmers that I call them gangster programmers, is so good. But when they are building things quickly, for the first time, it was like, this, Josh, that you've designed, no, this is where we're going with this. And I swear my wife was sitting on the couch over there, and she was like, whoa, because I had my headphones on. I jumped off the bed, and I was like, this is brilliant. I love it. So that would be the biggest, success, is taking sort of the developers that come from outside of law, and they're like, what is all this, And they're really good, but it's hard for them to extract like what they're actually building sometimes. And then for them to become legal tech developers was cool.
And do you think you've become any sort of a developer while they've become legal tech developers? or do you keep yourself away from that side of things?
Yeah, I try to focus. I recently brushed up on my coding skills, but I really do try to focus on kind of the biz dev stuff and the outward facing stuff. And
Yeah.
I design a lot of it because, again, I know what that interaction the attorney really wants, and what the end user wants, and how the admin, what they want to see, especially if they're procuring, technology, what they actually want to see. So that's my job, and their job is to be really, really, really good builders, and they are very, very good.
That's cool. That's good. Go ahead, Peter.
Running a startup often means thinking about or being anxious about you. That's a state of mind. Your next financing round. And the type of capital you go after, and especially we've seen this in legal, might have some big implications, especially if you don't hit the VC growth targets that, historically have sometimes been hard to hit for legal. And when you think about the future of your company, do you see it as something that really has, that potential? We're building a global platform, we're going VC here, that's the plan? Or are you thinking about different scenarios? What do you see there?
My background is in venture capital, right? And that's where we're going to go for sure. Although there's some interesting things that I've thought about from a neutrality perspective, back to that neutrality thing, and actually trying, at some point to do maybe a direct listing at some time before it's getting into serious private equity money, where you see a lot of legal tech headed now. And I think there's a lot of founders that jump too quickly. They get bought out, they merge. I don't know why, but you see that throughout. Like everybody, M&A activity for legal tech, before you ever reach global scale, you're bought, and who knows what happens to you in some cases. The other side, though, is that the pandemic has really made us really think about this as a business that we can sustain, build a business that we can sustain. And that's where the focus is now and continues to be. You can no longer rely on that type of funding growth, that type of funding stability. And you just got to build a business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, this is my fifth. That's what I'm good at. So I'm good with that, and we're funded well enough, but we're also building a business that I think, I really didn't plan on it, but I was ready to turn that switch if I needed to. Like, it wasn't the plan, but you do what you got to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair. I like the direct listing idea, but I also like that you're building a sustainable business, because that's what the times have called for right now. I think that's really fair. What haven't we covered about Theorem in the last few minutes that you really feel like you'd want people to know? That you want live viewers who are incredibly quiet tonight, who oftentimes come on just to insult me, because that's the friendship I've developed with these folks. But they're quiet. But we've got replay viewers and we've got podcast listeners. So what haven't we covered about Theorem that you would like to cover?
Interesting. I think we did a good job, but I will say consolidation is probably just such a much broader topic that would take its own kind of needs to be discussed. And I think that we have to get away from consolidation as a this is where the industry is headed. I actually think that there's ways to take advantage of the fragmentation. And I think that you can consolidate the pipeline with the goal of increasing access to alternatives. So not consolidation for consolidation's sake, but for consolidation as a means to opening up a massive amount of alternatives. So I think that is something that I just want to stress, because it's consistent with our values. So, but I think we did okay.
All right, good. Peter, any final questions for Joshua?
5 years from now,
Good call.
What do you hope is your biggest achievement?
I can't even answer these in interviews, before I started this company, when I was interviewing for different ones, it's like 5 years. My daughter's 3,
Right.
Oh,
It could be just as simple as her becoming 8 by then and being healthy and happy. That could be a success story right there too.
uh, yeah.
Just
5 years. Man, I want to see law open up in a way that it's sort of doing it in a means of maintaining its status in society, but as a sort of neutral, independent kind of body, but being so much more open that there's just much more access. There's much more access to it because there's professionals who are building out their own software applications that are made up of third-party applications, and it's so easy for them to do that they can give greater access to everybody who wants to engage with the legal system. So 5 years from now, do I think it'll happen in 5? Probably more like 10. But 5 years would be a good goal, right? Let's be audacious.
If we get enough Joshuas in the rooms, it'll certainly move it forward.
move it forward. Keep bringing people into this. Joshua, where do people find you online? Please plug your website and your social media and all that now. How do they get in touch with you?
I think all of our handles are at Theorem LTS, and TheoremLegal.com is our main site. You can email me directly at josh@TheoremLegal.com, as well as reach the team if you have just a generic question at support@TheoremLegal.com. So that'll work.
All right. And Peter, where do people find you online?
Legal.io. My email is peter@legal.io, and because it's spelled weirdly, every possible spelling will actually arrive.
A wise choice. And
Awesome.
they can also find you on Twitter.
Yep, digital lawyer on all social media platforms.
And look at this, coming in late. Andrew asks, I'm gonna go one question here from the audience because I think it is a good question.
Nice.
Question for Joshua. Can you please name the top 3 barriers to entry to sell to law firms for legal tech startups? And you're not only selling to law firms, but vendors as well with the marketplace. So maybe you've got, maybe if you have 1 or 2, that's fine as well.
The top 3 barriers to entry?
Barriers to entry to sell. Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on the stage of your company, right? Some law firms won't even speak to you if you can't answer the funding question. I've got 2 years of runway in the back, the bank, right? Which is really strange, especially, if you're coming into it from, sort of where I came from and the tech landscape where people are trying to do new things at a faster rate. The other one is you got to be able to answer the security question. And that's what we're enabling all the vendors to be able to do by standardizing that and giving people a badge to be able to see, hey, who's been assessed, so I know that their security posture before I even have to ask the question. And then, of course, probably the biggest one is, particularly if you're selling, like it's different, right? If you're a lower market solution, different. But for a large law firm, they're going to want to know who else is using your technology. And one of the funny things that happened to me early is I actually got in this interesting permission loop where I had an NDA in multiple places with different firms, and they were asking about, and it was really strange. So try to try to do your best by finding the right people who can really advocate for your product so that you don't have to get in those types of situations.
Excellent. Good question, Andrew. All right, folks, that is it for tonight because I'm going to let Joshua go to sleep and or go probably not to sleep but back to work. I know it's late over there, but thank you, Joshua, for being here. Guest again tonight was Joshua Maley with Theorem LTS. You can find them at TheoremLegal.com, and co-host tonight was Pieter Gunst. You can find him at Digital Lawyer on Twitter, and you can find him at legal.io. So thank you all. We'll see you next week. We will be back with arbitrator intelligence next week on Thursday. So that's going to be about what's evidently $1 trillion arbitration industry, international arbitration industry. So we will see what they're doing with their analytics platform. Thank you, everybody. Gentlemen, don't disappear. When we stop recording, I'll tell you all about all the follow-up stuff. Good night, all.
Thanks.